Tonight I want to talk about Daily Detox Plus. I want to talk about zeolite, clinoptilolite, and I want to talk about the concept of detoxification, why we want to detoxify, and why we're toxic to begin with. So let's just jump right into it. I got to do this. Wait a second. Let's share my screen. So it's going to start off similar to what I did at the conference a few weeks ago, but I'm going to do a deep dive into some of the science. But for those of you who haven't heard me already, this is me. I'm Rick Deitsch. I'm a biochemist, but I like to say I'm a little different in the field because I'm both a nutritional and a pharmaceutical biochemist. As a pharmaceutical biochemist, I run a company called Nutrapharma Corporation. Nutrapharma, we have drugs for the treatment of HIV, multiple sclerosis, adrenal mononephropathy, and pain. And we have over-the-counter drugs for the treatment of pain by the name of Niloxin for humans and Pet Pain Away for pets. And last year we launched Equine Pain Away for horses. It's fascinating because our raw material we use for all of our pain drugs is actually cobra venom from Asian cobras, which works as a potent neurotoxin and actually helps repair nerve damage, has nerve growth factors, and blocks pain, blocks the pain signals all over the body. So it's very fascinating work. As a nutritional biochemist, I work for the Rexall Sundown family of companies where I formulate over 100 different dietary supplements, conducted more than 50 different clinical studies in the field of dietary supplements and the use of supplementing of supplementation for overall general health. I also have been adjunct professor at Florida Atlantic University. I used to teach for the College of Science. I've taught physical chemistry lab, advanced biochemistry, organic chemistry. But more recently, I've been teaching test prep courses and also entrepreneurship classes. The last course I taught at FAU was called Technology Commercialization. How do you take an idea and turn it into a business? So it's a fascinating class. I've also co-authored 2 books, Are You Age-Wise? A Guide to Healthy Aging, and Invisible Killers, which you can see on the right of the page. Invisible Killers is what we're going to talk about tonight. What are the toxins in the environment? Where do they come from? How do they affect us? What do they do to us once they're in our body? And then the important stuff, how do you avoid the toxins, mitigate the risk of exposure, and actively detoxify? So that leads me to my first question I always ask, are you toxic? And the fact is, yes, we are all toxic. We have to understand there's toxins everywhere in the world. There's no place on Earth that is free of man-made toxins. They've actually taken core samples from Antarctica and found toxic man-made substances in the ice, deep ice in Antarctica. So the fact is, it doesn't matter if the toxins are made in the US or China or India, the wind blows and the water flows. So everywhere the wind blows and the water flows, toxins travel with it. So you have to ask yourself, how toxic am I and where am I getting these toxins? And it's easy. If you eat, breathe, or drink, you have toxic exposure. It's in the air around us. It's in the food you're eating, the water you're drinking. Foods, there's hormones and pesticides in foods. And I know people try to buy organic with the thought that something grown organic is supposed to be free of pesticides, herbicides, and genetic modification. But there was a study conducted by the FDA about 10 years ago where they looked at food that was marked, the fruits and vegetables were marked regular and fruits and vegetables marked organic, and they tested them for herbicides and pesticides and found that by far there were more pesticides and herbicides on the food marked organic than the regular food. And they theorized that just because it's grown organic doesn't mean that the wind doesn't blow and the water doesn't flow and that stuff winds up on the organic fruits and vegetables. And regular fruits and vegetables not marked organic can be washed in chemical baths to get a lot of that stuff off. But the organic stuff doesn't get washed like that. So you wind up with the stuff, no matter what you're doing, you're going to get some exposure. And then in our air from auto exhaust, cigarettes and heavy metals, household chemicals, toxic skincare products, it's pretty much all around us. When I first started talking about this in the mid-90s, there weren't a lot of sources for this sort of information. But if you look at the bottom of the screen, the National Institutes for Health has actually set up a website called Toxtown. And you see it, toxtown.nlm.nih.gov, or just do a Google search for Toxtown. And it's fascinating because you can basically walk around a fictitious town and see where toxins come from, and even go into a home, a sample home, and to show the different parts of the home and where you could have toxic exposure in your house. Okay. Meanwhile, all this I like to say is just the tip of the iceberg. And I've always loved this slide because about 90% of an iceberg is underwater. You don't see it. Only about 10% is above water. So we can talk about the fact that there's a lot of toxins we know about. There's toxins that are registered with the EPA. They have a LOAL, a lowest observed adverse effect limit, which is something that's recorded for anything you're exposed to. But they don't look at every combination of every toxin over the years, and of course metabolites and breakdown products of those toxins. And so there's literally an infinite amount of potential toxicity out there that we don't even know about. It's just the tip of the iceberg. And even as we live and we try to avoid toxic exposure, there's another sad part of all this. And the fact is, we're born with toxins in our bodies. A study conducted by the Environmental Working Group found, which is a DC-based advocacy group for the environment, they found, looking at umbilical cord blood of newborns, over 200 different toxic compounds, umbilical cord blood of newborns, over 70 of which were carcinogenic or potentially cancer-causing. And so we're born with this. So this is passed on from mother to child. People have asked me this a lot too. When we talk about detoxification, this is a perfect slide to bring this up. People have asked about pregnant women detoxifying, especially using the zeolite. And we've seen no issue whatsoever in pregnant nursing women using the zeolite. In fact, we did a small study just with 35 participants with Duke University, where we couldn't get nursing mothers, actively nursing mothers, because we couldn't get IRB approval for it. But we asked women who were finished nursing their babies but still expressing breast milk to continue pumping the breast milk so we could test it. And half the women we gave the zeolite to, and half the women we didn't give anything to. And we found that there were a lot of toxic compounds, primarily volatile organic compounds, in the breast milk of all the women. And over a period of a few weeks, we saw those amounts drop down precipitously with the use of the zeolites. So we knew the zeolites were removing toxins from the body, especially removing volatile organic compounds, which prevented it from getting into the breast milk and eventually to a baby. So it's fascinating stuff. So what do toxins do? Okay, and I've said this on stage, I've said this in a couple of my webinars and a couple of my conference calls. The active word is competition. Think of that word, competition. All right, so we have healthy metals we need for our bodies: calcium, magnesium, phosphorus, potassium, sodium, and even at microdoses, we need copper and manganese and boron. These are biomolecules that go into enzymes and go and actually have metabolic function in our bodies. So the problem is there's toxic heavy metals: mercury, lead, cadmium, arsenic, bismuth, tin, aluminum, antimony. And what they primarily do is compete for the good metals. And in so doing, they displace the good metals and slow down or inactivate metabolic processes. And I wanted to give you a couple of examples. I hope these come out right on this webinar. But like I said, we talk about heavy metals that combine and disrupt normal cell metabolism. I talked about different types of metals. And the thing too, I'm going to talk about body burden in a minute, but the concept is we normally will detoxify. We normally get this stuff out of the body, but over time it builds up in the body and it hides in different tissue. Different things hide in different tissue. So for example, lead loves to hide in bone. Aluminum likes to hide in brain tissue, the fatty tissue around the nerves. And can be a causative factor or certainly some sort of worsening factor in Alzheimer's disease and other neurologic syndromes. And then there's cadmium. Nickel causes lung damage. Chromium, cobalt, lead, mercury can cause all sorts of things like damage to the pancreas and bladder. But let's look at some concepts of how it works. So this is an ATP molecule, adenosine triphosphate. So this is the nitrogenous base adenosine, and this is 1, 2, 3 phosphates. It's a PO4. Now, a lot of you probably don't know what this is, but this is the energy currency of the body. When your body needs to do something, it spends ATP to do it. This is how things get done in the body. This is energy in the body. And the way it works is each one of these phosphate groups is negatively charged. You have a negative charge, and a third negative charge. Because they're all the same charge, they want to pull away. There's a huge amount of pressure for this bond and then this bond to explode. and release energy when it does. The reason it doesn't is normally there's a magnesium bound to there. In fact, active ATP is magnesium ATP. And the positively charged magnesium stabilizes the negative charge of that bond and allows that ATP to be useful. The problem is certain heavy metals, especially mercury, can bind to that site, inactivating the ATP because it doesn't get released. And so one of the damages you have from heavy metals is metabolic processes slow down, you have a lack of energy, and that's primarily because of ATP inactivation. So what happens when you use the zeolite? And I have a little model here. Here's the zeolite cage. Gobble, gobble, gobble. It takes the metal away. And then you have magnesium that can now finally get to its binding site and activate the ATP. So of course, this is an incredibly simplistic view of this process, but you can understand, get rid of the heavy metals and natural metabolic processes can occur, which includes things like ATP activation, ATP use. I have another example that I actually gave on stage, but I have a picture here that can help describe it, and that's zinc finger proteins. So zinc finger proteins are fascinating. They're called zinc finger proteins because at the very center of the protein is a single zinc atom that holds the shape of the protein, okay? So absolutely fascinating. So I wonder why my video just stopped. Okay, let's go back to share. So this is what a zinc finger protein looks like. Zinc finger proteins are a family of proteins. There's, I think, 23 natural zinc finger proteins in the human body, 23 different ones. And zinc finger proteins are necessary for cellular division. Anytime a cell is going to divide, it needs zinc finger proteins to help go in and copy the DNA. So this is important when you have a cut, a scrape, a broken bone, but it's vitally important when you have an infection, you have an attack, and you need more white blood cells to fight that infection. And so if you've ever sucked in a zinc lozenge when you had a cold or take a vitamin with zinc in it, that's why you're doing it. More zinc finger proteins, you produce more white blood cells that are your army to attack a viral infection or bacterial infection. So the problem is zinc can be displaced. So this one zinc atom here can be displaced usually by arsenic. Arsenic is smaller than zinc. It changes the shape of this protein and it stops working. And so when it stops working, what happens? Well, you can't properly copy your DNA, and so you heal slower, you have a weakened immune system. All these things are the symptoms of low-dose arsenic poisoning. So even a little bit of arsenic slows this process down, okay? So here's chats, okay. There we go, attendees. I was trying to see if I can find the chats. Okay, so this just shows you some competition, what happens when heavy metals get in your body. Okay, so let's go a little further and talk about detoxification. What do you do to get rid of these things? What does the body normally do? Okay, so the normal process of detoxification in the body is first, barrier elimination. Your skin functions as a barrier against toxic exposure. I talked about arsenic, for example. So our number one source of arsenic poisoning and arsenic toxicity is actually wood furniture that's used outdoors. All wood that's pressure treated for outdoors is treated with arsenic chloride to prevent termite damage. So you can see this, if you go to Home Depot and look at the outdoor wood, it'll have a big sign on it that says warning, contains arsenic, wear a mask when cutting, do not burn, all these warnings. But you build your deck out of it, you build picnic tables, and you eat on those picnic tables, and your dogs and cats are playing on the deck, and it's a huge exposure, especially to our pets and children, of arsenic. Now, our skin itself is a pretty good barrier against arsenic poisoning, but what happens is you touch the wood and then you eat, or you touch your face and you get the arsenic inside your body. So additionally, there's something that a lot of people don't understand is your digestive tract, for all intents and purposes, is outside your body. So as things move through the digestive tract itself is a barrier to absorption. And a lot of things that are toxic simply get eliminated right through your digestive tract. You just poop it out. You know, it gets absorbed, it gets removed through your fecal matter. But some things do get absorbed. And when some things get absorbed, the job of detoxification is primarily in the liver. The liver has a process called transformation, where it undergoes a huge change, enzymatic change, that makes most of these toxins water soluble so they can be removed from the body. And there's lots and lots of different transformation pathways. For example, I studied at length, I studied phase 2 human glucuronidation, which is a way for the body to get rid of excess hormones and lower risk of certain cancers like prostate and testicular cancer in men, ovarian, breast, uterine, and cervical cancer in women. And that's through phase 2 human glucuronidation. So there's all sorts of transformation pathways. But then what happens is you can't eliminate the toxins, you didn't stop them from getting in, you can't transform them. At some point, our exposure is higher than our ability to excrete. At that point, the toxins start to be sequestered. Okay, that means they start being, they start hiding around the body in metabolically inert or inactive tissue, primarily the bone and the fat, especially the fat around the nerve and fat and adipose tissue. And this is something else we discovered. We found that when people actively detoxify, they could lose weight. And we wondered why people were losing weight easier. And we found out that fat cells that have toxins in it are harder to break down. It's like the cell itself defends itself because it's holding all these toxins it doesn't want to release, doesn't want to get in the body. So as you lower the toxic load in that fat cell, it becomes more labile, it becomes easier to break down and easier to lose weight, actually easier to burn fat, which is a fascinating side effect of detoxification. Okay, so the sequestering of toxins in our body leads to what we call our body burden. All the toxins built up in our body. And there's no real way to find your body burden. And I've said this before, the only real way is cremation. And they've done that where they've cremated bodies and measured all the stuff, the volatile organics that came up and all the heavy metals that were in the bodies. And so we have an idea in some cases of what people's average toxic load is. But I don't recommend we all try it because you can only do it once. So the fact is, there's all sorts of challenge tests, things like that you can do to remove these toxins. But we know that all of us in this industrialized world are toxic. We have a toxic load. Now, some are worse than others. Some are what we call good excretors, and some are poor excretors. And we find the people that tend to have the most chronic illnesses are poor excretors. Okay, my screen has jumped. Okay. So let's get back to the slideshow and talk about decreasing the body burden. What can we do to get toxins out of our body? And most of the mechanisms for removing toxins from the body are what we call wasting mechanisms. How do you sweat more and how do you go to the bathroom more? Because if you're sweating more and going to the bathroom more, by definition, things are leaving your body. If they're leaving your body, then the toxins are going to go along with it. So that's the concept. Now, a lot of these are infrared saunas, for example, sweating. And yes, sweating can be good, but the fact is you don't lose a lot of toxin through your sweat. Toxins are primarily excreted through fecal matter and through the urine. And actually they can be sequestered in the hair as well. But there's lymphatic drainage, hydrotherapy. There's all sorts of energetic body work that's used in acupuncture, electromagnetic, homeopathic, vitamins, herbs, chlorella and algae, which are digestive detoxifiers. So primarily, though, these things are about going to the bathroom and sweating. So the main issue with these things is twofold. The first is dehydration. All these mechanisms of detoxification, you lose a lot of water. So you have to drink plenty of water anytime you're doing any kind of detoxification. The second thing, probably the more dangerous thing for a lot of these compounds, is addiction. Especially if you're using laxatives, if you're using senna-based teas, for example, or diuretics like dandelion root, the body gets used to it. And when you don't get it, like if you use dandelion a lot and then you stop using it, you can bloat, you can retain a lot of fluid. Same thing with senna-based teas. When you stop using it, you can have all sorts of side effects because peristalsis, normal muscular contraction through the digestive tract, doesn't work as well because the senna-based tea turns that off to drive things out of the body. And in fact, I talk about a condition called encopresis, which is basically chronic constipation followed by explosive diarrhea. And it's almost unique among people that use senna-based tea products and laxatives. And so I don't recommend that for long-term use or for use a lot, but a couple times a month, a couple times a week even is okay. You just can't use it so much that it becomes addictive. So the main thing we're going to talk about is specific detoxification. And the first one that was like that was chelation therapy. So the concept of chelation therapy is you specifically take molecules that go in and grab toxins and remove them from the body. in World War II, there was a huge increase in chelation therapy with EDTA. EDTA is a molecule that has a -2 charge. It kind of looks like a hand if you look at it, and all the fingertips are negatively charged. Altogether, there's a -2 charge. So it goes around and grabs things with a +2 charge. Lead has a +2 charge. And so in World War II, people that were painting with lead-based paints, people that were working with lead batteries in the motor pool had a lot of lead poisoning. And so they were doing EDTA chelation to remove the lead from the body. There's three main problems with chelation. The first is it's IV. So they're injecting it. So it is very hard to do. It has to be done by a physician or a medical professional. It's nothing you're just going to do in your house. The second thing is the dose in chelation is very high, so it puts a lot of pressure on the kidneys. So a lot of people do chelation therapy can wind up with kidney problems, and if you have kidney problems, you're not recommended to do those sort of chelation therapies. And then lastly, they're non-specific. Chelators tend to only be charge specific. EDTA looks for anything with a +2 charge. So lead has a +2 charge, but so does calcium, magnesium. And so as you're pulling out the lead, you're also removing calcium, magnesium, which is necessary for life. It's necessary for your health. So as you're chelating with the EDTA, you have to add calcium, magnesium back into the body. And because the concentration, the calcium, magnesium keeps going up and the lead concentration is down, you wind up just constantly removing the calcium, magnesium that you're adding back in. So you don't really get all the heavy metals out. You certainly don't get all the lead out of your body. And so the new approach is this concept of chelation clathration with natural products, especially zeolites. And so the concept of zeolites is it's a new approach to chelation and clathration. And zeolites aren't natural compounds. There's 49 different naturally occurring zeolites. And they're formed over thousands of years, usually in volcanic explosions. When the lava goes into salt water, it forms these zeolite cages, these aluminosilicate cages. We use an activated colloidal form, which is non-toxic with no side effects, is generally recognized as safe according to the FDA. It's got GRAS status, and it's particularly suitable for removal of undesirable heavy metal ions. So we use a zeolite called clinoptilolite, but I'll get into that in a minute. As I said, zeolite has a three-dimensional cage-like structure, but also has a negative charge. It's one of the few negatively charged minerals found in nature. Because of its cage-like structure, its negative charge, zeolites have the ability to draw to themselves and trap within themselves a variety of different compounds and a variety of different toxic compounds. Now, there are, as I said, 49 different naturally occurring zeolites, and they're in 3 families based on the crystal structures they form. The first is needle-like or prismatic crystal zeolites like scolecite. These zeolites form like pins, little pins, when they form crystals. Asbestos is a chain-like or prismatic zeolite. And so when you breathe it in, those little pins get stuck in the lungs and can cause all sorts of problems, including mesothelioma. So when you look up zeolite online, say zeolite and cancer, you could actually see, oh, zeolites cause cancer, but it's not really our type of zeolite. It would be a chain-like zeolite, which when breathed in can cause all sorts of damage. So you're not breathing in our zeolite, and we don't use that sort of zeolite. Then you have equant zeolites, sometimes called grape-like zeolites. And here's an example called chabazite. Chabazite is the primary salt that's used in salt lamps. If you ever have a big rock salt lamp and you heat it up, then when you heat it up, it forms it basically takes all the toxins out of the air, and so freshens up the air. And then we use clinoptilolite, which is sheet-like zeolite, which is generally recognized as safe, and in fact is completely considered completely non-toxic. And so it is the clinoptilolite zeolite has been used in traditional medicine for over 800 years. It's incredibly abundant. It's considered to be completely safe and non-toxic, and it really likes heavy metals and has low affinity for nutritional metals. These are the good things. But when I first started working with clinoptilolite in the 90s, I found out there was some bad stuff about it. Primarily, it's too big. When you get the zeolite from the mine site, it's a rough granular sand. It's 40 microns or bigger, up to 250 microns. It's too big to get into the bloodstream. It's too big to get into the body to be a systemic detoxifier. Additionally, mined clinoptilolite has a lot of toxins in it because that's what zeolites do. When air flows past them and water flows in, it sucks all those toxins out of the air and the water. And so when you get it from the mine site, it's full of toxic material. Therefore, it has a limited benefit because not a lot of surface area to attract toxin and heavy metals from your body. And it is true that it gets all sorts of toxins from the environment. When I first started making my zeolite product, we captured the volatile organic compounds that were coming off during the process to identify what was actually in the mine site in the zeolite that we're trying to remove. And we couldn't identify some of the volatiles, so we sent out to a third-party lab, and it came back as diesel fuel exhaust. Diesel fuel exhaust. So in other words, the mining equipment that was mining the zeolite were creating toxins that was being pulled into the zeolite. So even if you had a pristine environment, you didn't have a lot of toxins around it, just the mining equipment was putting toxins in the zeolite that would need to actually be cleaned out. Okay. Now I'm going to talk about that in a second, but let's talk about a little bit more about clinoptilolite. So this is a clinoptilolite mine site. All of this is clinoptilolite. And then you can get some hewlandite and some feldspar up top. These are men down here, so you can see how big this mine site is. This one mine site is 300 million metric tons of the zeolite. So we have plenty of it. Don't worry about running out. Okay. This is the structure of the clinoptilolite. It's alternating 8-sided and 10-sided pores, 8-sided and 10-sided, 4.2 by 4.2 angstroms and 4.2 by 7.5 angstroms of the pore sizes. Now this is important because there's a lot of, since I launched my original product in 2005, there've been a lot of knockoff products out there. And one of them just recently, their big story is that their zeolites are so small, they're 0.9 nanometers. Well, understand this. This one pore is about 0.9 nanometers, okay? So it's impossible to have a product that would have a cage-like structure to be able to pull toxins in if all you had was one single pore of a zeolite. Okay, so it's a ridiculous statement to say it's that small because it would be completely ineffective. Okay, so I'm going to show you how the smaller the metal and the higher the charge, the greater the affinity for the zeolite. Small, highly charged metals fit into the zeolite, and larger, lower charged metals do not. It just so happens that all things that are good for us, like potassium, sodium, magnesium, calcium, are larger with a lower charge, and all things that are bad for us, like arsenic, mercury, lead, are smaller with a higher charge. Additionally, we've seen selectivity. We know that the zeolite loves lead and mercury and tin and cadmium and arsenic and aluminum and antimony. And it's really because the small, highly charged metals fit better inside the pores and the channels of the zeolite. They get stuck inside the zeolite. And so I did, here, I did have a small movie I wanted to show you quickly that kind of shows this. Well, let's look at cation exchange first. Here, let's share. We'll look at cation exchange. So the concept here is that the zeolite exchanges metals. So here's a lead coming in exchanging for potassium. Here's a mercury coming in exchanging for calcium. An ammonium coming in exchanging for sodium. An arsenic coming in exchanging for calcium. This concept, this cation exchange happens over and over and over again until the highest affinity metals are trapped inside the zeolite takes on a net neutral charge and is simply washed out of the body. Okay. And then also volatile organic compounds. Volatile organic compounds get stuck to the outside of the zeolite. They're far too big to fit inside the pores of the zeolite, so they'll lay on the outside cage of the zeolite, causing a slight positive charge that it shares electrons with one cage and it draws another cage the other side of it, in essence making a toxic sandwich. And so I want to show this very quickly. Let's see if I can pull this up. Okay, I'm going to share this. Here we go. Okay, so this, I'm just showing, this is a zeolite cage and just shows what it looks like in three dimensions. You see the 8-sided and 10-sided pores. But what's more important is the space filling. When I fill the space, this is what it actually looks like. You can see how small the pores are. And you can see two sides of the cage have large and small pores. You're going to see that two sides of the cage only have small pores, and two sides of the cage of this cubic structure have no pores at all. So here you have, these have the small pores going through this side, and then on this side, no pores at all. This is where the volatile organic compounds get stuck. Okay. Okay, so let's do this. I want to show you capturing really quickly. Okay, so this is we're looking at the relative sizes of the different toxins, different heavy metals. You can see what will or will not fit into the zeolite cage. Let me do a better one here. I'll do this one. We'll show just one individual mercury, one individual calcium. Here we go. So this shows a mercury, and you can see the mercury is small enough that it can fit anywhere. It can fit in the small pores, and it can fit in the big pores. You know, it's small enough and highly charged enough. So there it goes in the smallest pore, and eventually it'll get trapped deep inside the zeolite. And therefore, once it's inside the zeolite, for all practical purposes, it's outside your body. It's completely sequestered. But let's look at something a little bigger, like a calcium. Okay? So here's calcium. Now, calcium is too big to fit in the smaller pores. It's just small enough to fit in the bigger pores. So it can go in, kind of wiggle in, you know, and eventually the calcium will move in, but it won't be trapped. It's not going to coordinate well. So what's going to happen is that will be able to move in and out of the zeolite. Okay. And then lastly, let's look at volatile organic compounds. I'm going to show you that. Here we go. So this is going to look at benzene. So volatile organic compounds have a flat structure, what they call benzene ring structure. And because they're flat, they can attach the flat side of the zeolite cage. And so let's zoom this right along. So there's a flat benzene ring, and it's going to lay across that zeolite cage and start sharing electrons with the zeolite cage. Once it does, it's going to take on a slight positive charge. So there it goes, it lays against the cage. It takes on a slight positive charge, which then draws another zeolite cage in circulation. And that second zeolite cage is going to be drawn to it and trap it on the other side of the benzene ring. And what, in essence, you're making is this toxic sandwich, which traps volatile organic compounds between the two sides. So it's really fascinating how this stuff works, but it's very, very, very efficient at taking out toxins and heavy metals. Okay, let's get back to the show. I want to talk about some of the clinical studies we're doing. Okay, well, actually, we're talking about the manufacturing process. What makes my clinoptilolite different than everybody else's? And as I said, the two major issues with the clinoptilolite were size and that it's dirty. So we have a proprietary micronization process. When we get the zeolite from the mine site, it's like a raw granular sand. It comes in these big sacks, you know, 40 to 50 pound bags. It's way too big. Every other zeolite manufacturer that's making a powdered product simply takes that powder, throws it in a canister, and throws a scoop in it. And so it might be good for digestive detoxification, but it's not going to be absorbed into the bloodstream and be a systemic detoxifier. So we go through a painstaking process that includes centrifugation and high pressure to reduce the zeolite to less than 5 microns, but our average particle size is actually less than 1 micron, which are with our smallest particles at 0.39 microns, which is way small enough to be absorbed from the digestive tract into the bloodstream. And we have clinical evidence to show that our zeolite actually gets absorbed at significant levels. Okay. Now, once we micronize, we add it to ultra purified water, and we start what we call the activation process, where we remove all the toxins and heavy metals that are in it. So we start with heat, and the heat drives off volatile organic compounds. That's the first step. And we do capture some of those compounds to see what they are, so we know what's coming off the zeolite. Then we start to exchange heavy metals and other pollutants in solution using natural acids. And you can see as the heavy metals come out, they oxidize and actually form almost like a rust that we remove from solution. Nobody else is doing anything like this. Every other zeolite product out there, this is what's in there. This stuff is actually in that zeolite reducing its activity, reducing its effectiveness. Okay, and then finally, air forced vacuum filtration. So we get down to the final zeolite. So we have a lot of clinical trials that we've conducted with this already. We did 3 trials in healthy individuals that were published as a single paper in a peer-reviewed journal. And that showed that in a 7-day trial, we saw 4 to 7-fold increase in heavy metal excretion of healthy individuals. In a 30-day trial, 5 to 7-fold increase in heavy metal excretion. Then we wanted to look at unhealthy people. So we looked at West Virginia coal miners. This was a double-blind, placebo-controlled clinical study of 84 days. And what I love most about the coal miner study is, besides the fact it was placebo-controlled, we told the coal miners they could take the product any way they wanted, okay? They just had to take it every day, and they had to be consistent in the way they took it. And then we asked them, when the trial was over, how they took the product. And it didn't matter how they took it. As long as it got in their body, they did well. People added to their food, their drink, just put it right in their mouth. There was one guy that added to his scotch every night when he had a drink of scotch. And it didn't matter. As long as it got in their body, they got the benefit. And we saw as much as a 15-fold increase in heavy metal excretion with the coal miners in the study. The other fascinating thing is we have what they call a negative placebo effect. Usually you ask the placebo patients how they feel, and there's always some that say they felt great, even though it was a placebo. In this case, every single placebo patient said our stuff made them worse. And it was just placebo. There was nothing in it. In fact, they said they felt like our stuff was hurting them when they were just getting a placebo. Now, the people that were using it and seeing the heavy metal excretion all reported having better sleep quality at night, having more energy during the day. They felt like their cognitive function improved. Many guys said that it felt like a fog had been lifted off their brain. They could think clearer. And then a lot of them have reported improved visual acuity, especially night vision and glare recovery, which we found was fascinating. We looked a little deeper into it, and we believe the mechanism there is that as you remove pressure from the liver for detoxification and transformation, the liver functions better. The liver produces more glutathione, which is a principal antioxidant that protects the eye, and you wind up with improved visual acuity over time. So that's our theory as to that mechanism, but we did see it in the clinical study. Okay, so we've done a lot of other clinicals. We did electrolyte levels because we were concerned, and a lot of people have been concerned, does clinoptilolate remove the good stuff along with the bad stuff? And this is something that farmers looked at in the 70s. They were using zeolite clinoptilolate for animal feed. And they said, well, it's removing the toxins and heavy metals, but is it removing good things like calcium, magnesium, and reducing the nutritive value of the animals? And so they did a large study with goats, cows, and sheep, all ruminants, and they looked at nutritive status of those animals. And they found across the board, the animals that got the zeolite had higher nutritional value than the ones that didn't. And the theory is competition. Remember that word, competition. As they removed the heavy metals from their diet and the heavy metals from the animals, they got better value from the food they were eating. So this became a nutritional enabler. They got better value from all the things they were eating and could absorb. And so they wound up healthier overall. So, excuse me. So we did electrolyte levels, and we found that electrolyte levels stayed the same or actually improved slightly over time as people used the zeolite. We also did a large study, over 300 patients in exercise recovery, showing that when they use the zeolite, people working out, especially competitive athletes, could recover faster and had improved performance. And then we also showed pH balancing with the zeolite. I'll talk about that in a minute. We looked at in vitro analysis, looking to measure volatile organic compounds, because we know it does pull out volatile organic compounds. And we also looked at depleted uranium, which a lot of soldiers coming back from war, depleted uranium is used in bombs to make them heavier because it's very dense material. So anytime there's munitions, these soldiers are getting uranium poisoning, which is radioactive and cause all sorts of damage. So if we look at volatile organic compounds, these are the top 10 or so that are pulled out by the zeolite, including formaldehyde, dichlorobenzene, toluene, and methylene chloride, benzene, the furans, the bipheноls, all the xylenes are all pulled out by the zeolite. So these happen to be highly carcinogenic, highly toxic, and they're all pulled out by the zeolite. Okay. So some people have asked me about other things that have been found out with the zeolite and some of the claims that were made with it. Now, clearly, we're not making any claim that Daily Detox Plus is going to help or have anything to do directly with any viral infection. That's just not what we're going to talk about. But there were 3 studies conducted primarily in enteroviruses that theorized that the zeolite could inhibit viral assembly. Now let's talk about that. So a virus is not really alive. A virus only has genetic material surrounded by a protein shell. It has to actually come in, and this example is HIV virus, but it has to come into the cell. And retroviruses actually have RNA, so it needs an enzyme called reverse transcriptase to make DNA. Once it has DNA, that DNA basically hijacks our cellular machinery. It goes into the cells and then gets our cells to use all of our machinery to make copies of itself. Now, when it makes copies of itself, it makes small pieces of the virus, all sorts of different pieces, and then it makes an enzyme called viral protease that cuts the pieces, and they take on a high charge. Once you have small, highly charged pieces of a virus, they start to pull together, and they pull together through hydrophobic and hydrophilic interactions, oil and water, but they also come together because of charge differential, and they undergo self-assembly. So it's like if I was making people, and I made a head, a torso, 2 arms, and 2 legs, and then they all came together to make a person. So that's how viral self-assembly works. Then once there's enough viruses in a cell, the cell literally explodes. It's called cell lysis, and all those viruses now can go and infect new cells. Now the theory is that the zeolite, if the zeolite is around, some of those small, highly charged viral particles before self-assembly will be drawn into the zeolite cage. And if that happens, then the virus undergoing self-assembly could be missing pieces, which would make an attenuated or weakened virus. As I said, there were 3 studies that looked specifically at clinoptilolite zeolite and its effects on potentially acting as an antiviral agent. All right. Now, there are also 2 studies looking at cancer and clinoptilolite. And again, I'm not making any claims that our product is going to stop or prevent or treat cancer, but I'm quoting the research. And what they found is for some reason, in the presence of zeolites, the P21 tumor suppressor gene is upregulated. Now, understand this. Most of the effect of the zeolite is extracellular. It's outside the cell. It's in the blood and the lymph and circulation, pulling out toxins in circulation. But some cells have poor or leaky membranes. Cells that are viral or bacterial attack have leaky membranes. If you have a fever, you have a leaky membrane. But also cancer cells are voracious. They're pulling in nutrients all over the place because they want to make copies as quickly as they can. And so anything near a cancer cell is going to get pulled into the cell through endocytosis. And so the theory here is you have the zeolite floating around the body. It's sucking up heavy metals and volatile organic compounds. It gets near a cancer cell, gets sucked into the cancer cell, and it's this toxic bomb that now delivers all these toxins into the cell, and it now turns on the tumor suppressor gene, the P21 gene, which the job of that gene is to look for abnormalities and issues. And once that gene turns on, it triggers apoptosis, which is programmed cell death or cell suicide. The cell kills itself. I think it's a really fascinating mechanism, and it's apropos because the toxins that principally could have caused the cancer are actually being used to kill a cancer. You know, it's the same toxins being delivered to that cancer. So it's fascinating. Additionally, we did look at pH. We talked about balancing pH, and we want to know how that works. And I don't go into all these things, but I'm basically going to say that the concept of pH is water is HOH or H2O. But water exists ionically as H plus and OH in solution. So you wind up with hydroxyl and you wind up with protons, positively charged hydrogen ions. The more protons you have, the lower the pH, the more acidic. The more hydroxyl groups, OH you have, the higher the pH and the more alkaline or basic, okay? pH of 7 is neutral, lower than 7 is acidic, higher than 7 is alkaline. We want our bodies to be slightly alkaline. About 7.4 is natural and where everything works. But what happens is through lack of poor diet or lack of exercise or other bad habits or disease states, our pH tends to become acidic, which becomes a playground for cancer and viruses and bacteria, and your enzymes don't fold correctly, so your proteins don't work correctly. And so one of the first things they do in the hospital, a lot of times they'll give you bicarbonate to raise the pH in your body. So they'll push bicarbonate to basically just make you a healthier environment in your body. So what the zeolite does is fascinating, is when there's an abundance of H plus, or sometimes called hydronium, H3O plus, that's positively charged, and that can move into the zeolite cage. And so what we try to say is that the zeolite in that case acts as a geographic buffering agent. Wherever the zeolite goes, some of those positively charged hydrogen ions will move into the cage, and for all practical purposes, now they're out of your body because they're inside the zeolite cage, and the pH of that area goes up. And then they'll go to another part of your body that has a higher pH and release those protons. So it buffers all over the body. So a very fascinating mechanism. Okay, so let's talk about the actual claims that are being made and the product itself. So this is Daily Detox Plus. Understand, this is my original formula that I've been making since the mid-2000s. We sold millions and millions and millions of dollars worth. We've helped thousands of people with detoxification and living a better life. And now we brought it to Navan Global. So it's exclusive to Navan. It is the only truly micronized and activated zeolite suspension, proven safe for long-term use, and has been the subject of more than 14 clinical studies. Here are the claims that we can legally make on the product. I talked about some things that zeolite does and some of the research, but it does remove toxic and heavy metals from the body. It helps support a healthy immune system. It helps maintain healthy alkaline pH. And the underlying common denominator is a cleaner, healthier body fixes itself. Now, as far as dosing, we do recommend a detox dose for the first month. So it's 10 drops 4 times a day, breakfast, lunch, dinner, bedtime. And then we recommend a maintenance dose after that, 10 drops twice a day. Certainly you can use more. I never recommend doing more than about 15 drops simply because you're not going to get that much absorption. It's passively absorbed. So right around 15 drops, you have a negative return where less is being absorbed and more is going to stay in the digestive tract. So once again, 10 drops 4 times a day. So you'll go through about 2 bottles the first month and 1 bottle each additional month. Okay. With that, I hope I didn't go too long. I think I'm good on time, but I do have a lot of Q&A. So let's see how I get that. On a recording. Okay, so first question, how will the zeolite affect someone that recently had a kidney transplant? And so it's interesting. So kidney transplant, they're going to be on a protocol for anti-rejection medications, and there's no concern, there's no interaction with any rejection medication in the zeolite. I really don't see any concern whatsoever. They can take it normally. When you have a kidney transplant, you are recommended to drink more water, as opposed to when you're on dialysis, we have to drink less water. So they just have to make sure they're maintaining their fluid intake. So when you're using this, you really need to drink plenty of water, 8 to 10 glasses of water a day. And that's true of any detoxification. Is a detox safe for pregnant women? Absolutely. It's safe for pregnant nursing women. Now, of course, we write in the materials what you always do. Anyone that's pregnant or nursing, any children, or anyone that has a medical condition, so should always consult their medical professional before starting any dietary supplement or regimen of exercise. So that's something we always recommend. Like I said, we did a small study with the breastfeeding mothers. We never really wrote it up, but I do have that data. So I'll see what I can pull together. If anyone wants it specifically, just let me know and I'll make it available. Someone asked about being a guest in a radio show. I've done a lot of radio. In fact, primarily after my book came out, I was a special guest talking about toxins in the environment, things like that. But they started pulling me in for everything. And back in 2014 when they had the Ebola crisis, they called me and said, "What do you know about Ebola?" I'm like, "I know about Ebola." So they put me on the radio as an expert to talk about Ebola. Now, I'm certainly not an Ebola expert, but I understand Marburg type viruses and how they transmit and things like that. So I basically answered questions about Marburg type viruses. But it was fun. So I'm always happy to do radio shows. If you want me, just reach out to Navan and they can get a hold of me and we can schedule it. Can a person with cancer use detox? Absolutely. We talked about some of the mechanisms involved. There are some caveats. The zeolite will pull out heavy metals and toxins, and some chemotherapeutic drugs are actually heavy metals. So for example, platinum-based drugs, cisplatin and carboplatin, will be pulled out by the zeolite, and we've seen it. So we do recommend that if someone is undergoing chemotherapy, especially chemotherapy with a platinum-based drug, they discontinue use of the product for a few days before and wait for 3 to 4 days after chemotherapy to start up again, to give the chemotherapy a chance to do its work. Because remember, by definition, chemotherapy is a toxin. It's a toxin trying to kill the cancer cells, and it kills healthy cells as well. So, but you really want to not take the zeolite during the time you're on the chemo, on the days you're under chemo, because you don't want it to be pulled out. Someone asked about the equine pain away. Yeah, so there's a website, equinepainaway.co, equinepainaway.co, to learn more about it. But let's see if I can save that and get back to you. Let's see. How dangerous are salt lamps? Well, I got to tell you, no zeolites are considered to be dangerous, even the ones full of toxic and heavy metals, because they have such a high affinity for those toxic and heavy metals, they hold on to it. My contention is that they're dangerous. My contention is that they're not effective. By cleaning them out and removing all those toxic and heavy metals, those high affinity compounds, we make it that much more effective and increase the surface area. So I don't think there's any danger to salt lamps. Most of what it's going to do is it's going to suck up the positively charged compounds in the air, which are the things that are smelling up the place. So it does help deodorize the area. How does it know not to take the calcium out of the body since it fits in these? Okay. So someone asked, how does it know not to take the calcium out? And this is, remember I showed two slides. The one showed by size how it fits into and out of the zeolite. The other showed points of coordination, how it gets stuck deep inside the nooks and crannies of the cage. And the smaller molecules, the smaller atoms with higher charge will get stuck further in the cage with more points of coordination. And so it doesn't like calcium, magnesium, phosphorus, and sodium, but it loves mercury and lead and cadmium and arsenic and things like that. And so what'll happen is some calcium will go into the cage, but then it gets near a mercury and it's, oh, there's a mercury. It grabs mercury and the calcium will get spit out through cationic exchange. And this will happen until the zeolite is just full of high affinity molecules, high affinity atoms, and the net charge of the zeolite is a net neutral, at which point it gets excreted from the body. It's important to know no zeolite stays in the body. There's no point of deposition. We've actually done VODIPI and technetium labeled studies showing that it doesn't deposit in the body. It's all excreted. It's usually between 4 and 6 hours, depending on the person's diet, physical activity, and how often they go to the bathroom. Could you give this detox to animals like dogs? I actually just supplied Navan with an old marketing piece we did, Zeolite and Pets, where people used it with their dogs, cats, birds, and had incredible results. So this is, it's fascinating and certainly can be used with animals. So I explain the difference between NRF2 and RZ. I don't know what NRF2 is. So if someone can tell me what NRF2 is. I know there's a lot of knockoff products out there. Someone's asking about preventing people from getting current viruses. I can only tell you that a cleaner, healthier body fixes itself, and there are certain mechanisms at play that suggest that it does have some antiviral capacity, but I'm not going to make any suggestion or any claim that it's going to help in the current viral crisis. Someone asks, is it safe on chemo? I already talked about that. Is it safe for teens? Absolutely. Pregnant and nursing mothers, I already talked about that. Yeah, absolutely. Do you get the zeolite pest, the cell membrane, any type of a lipid or vitamin? No, well, here's my point. One of the things I didn't talk about is the concept of a dumping crisis. And I talk about this in a lot of my lectures. A lot of people that go through detoxification, especially with wasting products that make them go to the bathroom more, they suddenly get sick. They feel flu-like symptoms or run down, chronic fatigue, digestive issues. They call that a dumping crisis or dumping syndrome because what's happening is so many toxins are coming out of sequestration that it's actually causing all sorts of, it's driving their system haywire. The zeolite doesn't work like that because it's really slow and steady and constantly detoxifying as you take it on a daily basis. So it pulls out toxins from the blood and the lymph. And then what happens over time is you create a concentration gradient where it's almost like a vacuum in the blood and the lymph, so that the toxins and sequestration will start to be released slowly into the blood and lymph into circulation. As you continue to use the zeolite, you're going to be pulling that out. And we saw that especially with the West Virginia coal miners because we know the affinity scale of the zeolite. So the first couple of days, we saw mercury come out a lot, then we saw lead, then we saw arsenic, and then a week later, suddenly we see a bunch of mercury again. And what was happening is we cleared out the mercury in circulation, and a week later, all this mercury got dumped into the system as it came out of tissues, and we started removing that again because that was the higher affinity product. So it was fascinating to watch this, but that's exactly how it works. What stops someone from going to Amazon, buying zeolites in powder form to claim or microdose? Well, nothing stops them. It just doesn't work. You know, we've done plenty of clinical studies. We know everyone out there has basically tried to knock off my technology, which took me over 10 years to perfect and you know, hundreds of thousands of dollars. But we've looked at pretty much every product out there. And most of them use my marketing material and say it's microdosed and activated, but it isn't. Most of that material is, like I said, they take powdered zeolite, put a scoop in it, and sell it to you. And I'm not saying that's bad. You know, it's going to be a digestive detoxifier, but it's not going to be a systemic detoxifier. It's not going to do everything that the Daily Detox Plus is going to do, and getting rid of all the toxic heavy metals in the body. I also talked about how some of the science just makes no sense. I talked about that one spray zeolite that claims to be 0.9 nanometers. It's just not possible. And even if it was, it wouldn't work. By definition, it wouldn't work. There's another zeolite. They claim that it's not a zeolite. They're zeolite particles that are positively charged. Well, if it doesn't have a cage-like structure and a negative charge, it's not a zeolite, and it won't take toxins out of the body. So just their marketing material shows how ignorant they are of the science. They don't understand the chemistry involved and how this stuff works and how to make it as effective as it can be. Can I provide the studies? I provided all the studies. A lot of, if you read the white paper, there's 3 pages of references at the end of the white paper. I can provide any of those studies and references, including the ones we talked about for viruses, especially the enterovirus paper is fascinating. So just let me know, I guess through Navan, if someone calls customer service, I can make those papers available. Is dosing the same for children? Yeah, I mean, small children, you can certainly give them less. They don't need to take 10 drops 4 times a day for detox. 10 drops, 8 to 10 drops twice a day is plenty. Is it possible calcium get trapped in the VOC'S in the toxin sandwich? No. Volatile organic compounds don't trap minerals. They don't work like that. Is zeolite safe for diabetics and people taking Plavix? So let's talk about diabetes first, because we have a lot of experience with diabetics. You see, diabetes itself, the big danger of diabetes is that the longer you have high levels of glucose in circulation, the greater the chance of glucose is going to attach to something called glycosylation. And depending on where the glucose attaches are the side effects or the detriments of diabetes. So, example, if it attaches to the retina, it causes diabetic retinopathy. If it attaches to the blood vessels, it causes narrowing and claudication, which can lead to amputation of limbs. If the glucose attaches to nerves, it causes neuropathy. And so the danger is the glucose sitting around long enough to attach to things. And the fascinating thing is that glucose carries a positive charge. It has a dipole moment positive charge. And what we believe is happening when diabetics take the zeolite is that they have better blood sugar control and they have fewer side effects from their diabetes. And we believe it's because the zeolite is kind of dragging it along the body. It doesn't really capture the glucose because the glucose is too big, but with its positive charge, the zeolite is grabbing onto it, kind of moving it around the body, keeping it in circulation and preventing it from glycosylation, preventing it from attaching to things. And I've told this story before where I was at a meeting and a guy actually got up on stage and said, I was blind and now I can see. And I usually don't like testimonials because I like the science behind what's happening. But in that case, people in the crowd were going crazy. What's going on? I had to find out what was happening. And this particular person was a brittle diabetic, taking 4 shots of insulin a day. Blood sugar was all over the place. HbA1c was over 15. He started taking care of himself, and that included adding the zeolite to his diet. But he was eating better. He was watching his blood sugar, and he had early stages of diabetic retinopathy, which is the leading cause of adult blindness in the United States. And once he got healthier and his HbA1c came down, the retinopathy reverted. And so did the zeolite cure blindness? Absolutely not. But it helped balance his system. It helped balance his blood sugar, and a cleaner, healthier body fixes itself. And you're going to find these amazing testimonials are going to be coming out in the coming months and years. And you're going to find out that the common denominator is always a cleaner, healthier body fixes itself. The body is an amazing machine that's made to fix itself. The metals, the toxins get in the way. Affecting tissue-bound toxins. I talked about that. The tissue will release the metals over time. Chronic illness, heavy metal, who are very sensitive, everything is smaller dose, okay. So someone's asking this, and this is a good question. So there are people that are poor excretors. I talked about good excretor and poor excretors that have a huge body burden. And they're very, very sensitive to detoxifiers. They're very sensitive to other toxins, very sensitive to many medications. And for those people, they have 2 choices. They can either take a high dose, drink plenty of water, and they're going to feel sick. They're going to have some problems associated with detoxification, as I talked about, this dumping crisis that can occur in a small percentage of people, or lower the dose. Lower the dose, even just a few drops a day to start, building over time, drink plenty of water to detoxify much slower because these people have so many toxins that want to come out. Okay, so it becomes your choice. But my recommendation is certainly for to feel better, just lower the dose and drink plenty of water. Um, uh, Someone had felt no change with the original Navan Detox. The Detox Plus likely have a different effect. I don't know enough about the original Navan Detox product. I know it certainly wasn't my product with the greater surface area. So I'm going to say, yes, I expect people to have a much better result with the Daily Detox Plus than they did with the original Daily Detox. This is great because what we normally find, even with healthy individuals, is they find they have more energy during the day, they're sleeping better at night, improve cognitive function, improve visual acuity. We see that with generally healthy people. And then, God forbid, you have a chronic condition or you're older, you have all sorts of issues, you're going to find some phenomenal results taking the Daily Detox Plus. What about someone who can't drink lots of water because of retaining it? Well, retention of water is a problem in and of itself. So you got to see about what your sodium status is. You should be increasing potassium in your diet to try and lose some water. And chances are, if you're medicated for this, you're probably on a diuretic like hydrochlorothiazide. So certainly you can take it, try to drink as much water as you can. If water intake is a problem, just lower the dose. Since potential being antiviral is okay to take with a medication like Plaquenil. I talked about the antiviral properties of zeolite in general and how it works. It certainly does not have any contraindications with any drugs except for metal-based drugs. Like I said, like cisplatin and carboplatin. Would this help to rebuild detox neuropathy due to chemotherapy that was platinum-based? I don't know. I can tell you, cleaner, healthier body fixes itself. Zinc-frequent proteins will be upregulated, which help in the healing process. Peripheral nerves can heal. Central nerves tend not to heal, and they require stem cell therapy. So it would be interesting. Certainly, it would remove excess platinum from the body. Because even years after you undergo platinum-based chemotherapy, you have a high level of platinum in the body, and that needs to be pulled out. So the zeolite will pull that and certainly be beneficial. Let's see. A lot of people are asking about the breastfeeding stuff. I have genetic getting so my liver tends to hold intoxicated. Your liver supplement was probably to help my liver. Okay, so I talked about this before, and actually, my very first supplement I ever created for Rexall was called Liver Essentials, and it was a liver detox product with silymarin and globe artichoke and things like that. And I love doing the research on that. And it's funny because dietary supplements are hard to sell because, for the most part, there's no physical evidence of their effect. A lot of people take dietary supplements on faith. That's why weight loss supplements do so well, because people lose weight and you can see it. So I had a product to lower cholesterol. No one's walking up the street saying, "Hey, Rick, your cholesterol looks great today." It doesn't happen. And so you have to have some sort of tangible benefit. So we first launched the Liver Essentials. Everyone said, "Well, how do I know it's going to work? How do you know?" And one of the things you notice is people with liver dysfunction, even minor liver dysfunction, will have some slight yellowing in the eyes. And so we took 20 people and we took close images of their eyes, and we saw over a period of a month, their eyes got brighter and whiter. It was almost like a personal care product or a vanity product. And we showed how healthy the liver was. You could actually see it in the whites of your eyes. Your eyes are sparkling now. So certainly liver is important. Liver undergoes transformation. We do believe that as the zeolite detoxifies the body, it takes pressure off the liver. It gives less work for the liver to do, which helps improve liver function overall. We have seen people's liver enzymes come down and stabilize. We didn't specifically look at cirrhosis. We have looked at patients with hematochromatosis, which is iron overload and caused usually by poor liver function. We've seen those liver enzymes come down and iron loads come down with patients using that. So certainly, I can tell you that it's certainly safe to take if you have liver products and if you have a liver problem and taking liver supplements. How would detox help with cancer patients? Pretty obvious. A cleaner, healthier body fixes itself. Especially as they're undergoing chemo and radiation, there's a lot of toxins that are produced in that. That needs to be removed as well. When should we take the Restore the same as detox before? That's a really good question. I don't really recommend taking a lot of minerals with the zeolite. So I would recommend separating them by about 2 hours. That's probably the best bet, so that the cationic exchange can occur a little unimpeded when you first take the zeolite. Dose for babies and children, I said, maybe 5 drops or any for small baby, for babies and toddlers, maybe 5 drops a couple times a day, 3 to 5 drops a couple times a day. For children or teenagers, 8 to 10 drops twice a day is plenty. Have we done any testing in quadriplegic? No, we have not done any testing in quadriplegics. Can you go over the dosage one more time? Should be used consecutively for, say, a year. How often and how long does it need to be used? Well, I'm going to tell you this. We're all toxic and we're exposed to toxins every day. This should be used every day. As long as you're eating, breathing, and drinking, you're exposed to toxins and you should be taking this. So I don't recommend ever stopping. Certainly, I recommend the detox dose, which is 10 drops 4 times a day for the first month, then drop down to 10 drops twice a day. After that, that's the maintenance dose. I do recommend repeating the detox dose every 6 months or so to kind of do a flush of the system, you know? What are some of the toxins you cannot remove? That's a pretty good question. You know, certainly large toxins that are not volatile organic compounds. We looked at some of the organophosphates that in some cases actually carry negative charge. But my point is this: instead of trying to look at each individual toxin the zeolite can remove, the important thing is to know that it removes a lot of toxins, and by so doing makes a healthier system, improving the liver function and kidney function, and any toxins that are left can now be processed normally by the body. So the liver can undergo transformation of what the zeolite itself does not take out. But there are specific toxins it doesn't remove, but it does remove volatile organic compounds, nitrosamines, and heavy metals. What is the effect on kidneys in someone on dialysis? Well, it's not the effect on the kidneys. Certainly, it's detoxifying. The problem with dialysis patients is they're limited in their water intake. And so I'd recommend that they take a lower dose because they can't drink enough water to support it. The zeolite is easily filtered in dialysis. The dialysis clinics might see something new coming out, but it's fine. It's perfectly healthy and certainly will help detoxify the patients. Will the detox help regulate blood sugar? I already went over that, I think. We talked about blood sugar. It doesn't help regulate blood sugar, but it does keep it in circulation. So if you're trying to stabilize your blood sugar and lower HbA1c, the zeolite will help immeasurably. What about Lyme disease? So Lyme disease is completely different, and I've talked about this in a couple of my other talks. Lyme disease is caused by a bacteria, by Burgdorferi. If you know you have Lyme disease, you have to take antibiotics. You have to take the course to get rid of the bacteria. That's first and foremost. Kill the bacteria. Once a bacteria is dead, the problem is what we call post-Lyme syndrome. The bacteria excretes endotoxins, which can go into the nerves and cause all sorts of long-term damage. For people, even tertiary Lyme patients, it's usually anywhere from 1 to 3 years, and it is self-limiting. Most patients will get better, but there are patients that for years have post-Lyme syndrome and neurologic syndrome because of it. I can only tell you there's no direct result with the zeolite taking out endotoxins, but a cleaner, healthier body fixes it itself. So by taking the zeolite, it's going to help all sorts of cellular repair processes. What are common detox side effects? Well, with this, there really are no side effects. The only issue is you have to drink plenty of water. It can cause mild dehydration. But other detox side effects I talked about, wasting syndromes, flu-like symptoms, things like that, depending on what type of detoxification you're doing. And again, will you feel, Linda Chiappetta, will you feel ill while detoxing? For the most part, the great majority of people will not feel any negative side effects from taking the zeolite. The very small percentage of people that are highly toxic and highly sensitive may feel what they call a dumping syndrome and feel flu-like symptoms and things like that. In that case, I told people, if you know you're like that, simply lower the dose and drink plenty of water. Safe for diabetics, I already went over that, yes. Does it only work in your gut like most everything else? And I went over that too. No, it's systemic. We have clinical trials that show urinary increased excretion of heavy metals. The only way to increase the excretion in the urine is it got into the body. There's no direct route from the digestive tract to the urine. It has to go in circulation of blood, the lymph, through the kidneys and the bladder, and eventually out through the urine. So we have plenty of evidence that this actually gets in the body to be a systemic detoxifier. Does it work in the brain? Great question. We've never done studies that show it actually goes through the blood-brain barrier. I do believe in neurologically impaired people that have a leaky blood-brain barrier, it probably does go through the blood-brain barrier. But for the most part, it doesn't matter because as it cleans out toxins in circulation, even the brain is going to start releasing toxins from sequestration back into the bloodstream, back into the lymph, and it will lower those heavy metals that are trapped in the brain. Thank you for your time. Well, thank you. Someone's asking for other products that we're not going to do yet. Same dose for animals? Not really. You can use much less in dogs and cats based on weight. Let's see. Would detox help with someone on a liver transplant list? Certainly, if someone's already on a liver transplant list, they're in end-stage liver failure, chances are that they're not going to regenerate their liver. The liver is an amazing organ, though. It can just by itself regenerate. You can be a living liver donor and within a year completely regrow the liver you donated. So liver is an amazing organ that way. Certainly it can't hurt. It can help with liver function, but chances are it's not going to get them off the liver transplant list. Someone's asking me about competitive products that I don't know about. Yeah, I can't comment on product I don't know about. I can look into it later if someone asks customer service and make a recommendation. Does help with fatty liver, liver cirrhosis? Again, there's no direct, it doesn't directly go in the liver, do anything in the liver, but we believe it takes pressure off the liver, so liver transformation can occur unimpeded. It does help improve liver function because of that. Have you seen improvement with people that have vitiligo? That's actually a pretty good question. We had, and I actually have vitiligo on my hands and a little bit on my face. You can see it. This happened because, believe it or not, I had a bad piece of shrimp at a restaurant in Sydney, Australia. So I had no issues whatsoever. And I went to a restaurant called the Sushi Train, which has sushi on little train cars that go around the restaurant. And God only knows how long that sushi was riding around on that train. You just take it off and eat it. And one piece of sushi tasted funny. And within an hour, I had hives all over my body, broke out. I had a hyperimmune reaction from a bad piece of shrimp. And I did get vitiligo. I did use a zeolite, and I did see it stop spreading and have slight improvement over time. But I haven't done a too big a reaction, too big a study on that, just on myself. Understand that vitiligo, for the most part, is tied to thyroid function, and my thyroid function was fine, but it is autoimmune. It's your immune system destroying melanocytes. It can also lead to alopecia areata, which is loss of hair and spots. But it's interesting. Certainly, we know that it acts as an immunomodulating agent simply because it's reducing toxins in the body. So it's something I might want to look at in the future if we can do a controlled study on vitiligo. Does it remove mercury from the brain? I already discussed that. The brain will lose mercury, it'll lose all sequestered toxins over time. Aluminum, yes, it certainly does remove aluminum. I did mention the 8 toxic heavy metals we looked at: mercury, lead, cadmium, tin, bismuth, antimony, aluminum. Aluminum is important because aluminum is, if not a causative factor, it's a complicating factor in Alzheimer's disease. And we found that even though there's aluminum in the zeolite, that aluminum is trapped in the zeolite cages and the bars of the cage. So it doesn't add aluminum to the system, but we measured excretion rates of the aluminum above and beyond the aluminum that was in the zeolite. And we saw patients excreting lots of aluminum with the zeolite. So absolutely. Let's see. So someone can claim they're, yeah, people make all sorts of false claims all the time. So people claim that they're micronized and they're not. People claim that they're activated, they're not. So yes, nobody does what I do. No one understands what I do. It is a protected trade secret. I did have to fight a company in court that was claiming to use my my trade secret, and they weren't. And I actually won that court battle and got an injunction against that company. So and that also proved in federal court that what I have is a trade secret, a protectable trade secret. So let's see. So someone's talking about TRS claiming it's purposely left in an unclean state. I didn't see that. On the TRS product, which I was specifically asked to address, their main claim was that they were 0.9 nanometers. They also said that they were a manufactured zeolite, which I don't understand. Cladotile is a natural product. If you're making it synthetically, it's not legal for human consumption. They'd actually have to file with the FDA to sell the product. There are synthetic zeolites, but synthetic zeolites are primarily used in the oil and gas industry as molecular sieves, kind of filters used to separate oil products and ethane products. And they're completely different. Synthetic zeolites are completely different from natural zeolites. Let's see. Someone said, didn't catch what I said, 4 times a day for how long? I said for the first month, you want to take 10 drops 4 times a day, breakfast, lunch, dinner, and bedtime, and then twice a day after that. So for the first month, do the detox dose. How are you testing results? Blood tests. Well, we did in our clinical research, we did heavy metal analysis through urinary excretion. We collected fecal matter. We also shaved the chest of coal miners. We got chest hair, looking at excretion rates through the hair. So we measure in all sorts of different ways. Certainly, individuals can do a heavy metal challenge test where they take something, they actually reduce, they treat a lot of heavy metals, they collect the urine. And there's great smoky labs, doctors' data. There's a lot of companies that do those sort of tests. And then if you do it in the beginning and maybe in 3 or 6 months, you should see much lower levels of heavy metals coming out. What if someone has metal joint replacement? Any problems? No, not at all. It's about circulating heavy metal out. It's not going to pull metal off of a metallic joint. Yeah, so again, someone said synthetic clenoptilolite, which makes no sense to me. That would actually be an illegal product. If they were synthesizing clenoptilolite, that it would be illegal for human consumption. They'd have to file an NDI, new dietary ingredient, with the FDA and actually prove that it's safe. So it makes no sense that they have a synthetic clenoptilolite. Does it help with Alzheimer's and dementia? We haven't studied Alzheimer's and dementia. I can tell you that things like aluminum certainly worsen Alzheimer's, and we did have several patients that had Lewy body dementia early on in 2005, 2006, and they saw great results with the zeolite. Help with snoring. I never saw anything where it helps with snoring, so sorry about that. Let's see. I think I'm going to have to wrap it up. Maybe just do a couple more questions. Someone asked about hemochromatosis. That's a good question. So hematochromatosis or hemochromatosis is the body can't properly turn over its iron stores. And so you have high iron levels, which can cause heart disease and a lot of pressure on the liver. And the treatment for hematochromatosis is phlebotomy. You have to give blood every couple of months, and that lowers the iron in your body, and you have to watch your iron intake. So we've had several people with hematochromatosis use the zeolite very effectively. Now, iron is low on the affinity scale of the zeolite, but because concentration goes up by concentration, there's more of it, so there's more for the zeolite to take out. I'm not saying that would be the only thing you'd have to do, but certainly it helps balance the liver. It certainly helps balance the iron loads in the body. And those particular patients, instead of doing phlebotomy 6 times a year, they were doing it like twice a year when they were taking the zeolite. So they got a good benefit from that. Will this lower creatinine readings in dialysis? Probably not. You know, it depends how kidney function works and what their intake is of creatine to begin with. Because creatinine shows liver function, but it shows cycling of creatine, which creatine comes not just from natural production in the body, about 2 grams a day, but from intake, like salmon, and from creatine supplements. So it depends. Let's see. It's better put under the tongue. Not necessary. As I said, with the coal miners, they took it every which way, and they got absorption no matter what. Someone with an autistic son, dosage would be the same, no different. You might want to start a little slower because depending on the form of autism, it could be heavy metals involved. And so take a little lower dose at first and see how that works. Breast implant illness survivors have explant encapsulated high volumes of heavy metals. If any amount of toxins for the scar tissue. Again, we haven't done these specific testing looking for things like toxins in scar tissue. Certainly, it's going to remove toxin circulation, and any toxins that are available to come out of encapsulation or sequestration will come out over time. Let's see. All right, I'm going to do one more. I'll choose randomly. Oh, this is a good question. Doing research on other products, I noticed the dose of zeolite is 500 milligrams to a gram. Your product is much lower, 10 milligrams per dose. Well, understand those products are primarily for digestive detox. When I launched my first product with this research, the only real product out there was a powdered zeolite in a canister with a scoop, or you can get it in capsules. You take 6 capsules a day for the treatment of diarrhea. It was basically a huge amount of zeolite that was going to the gut and just forming a rock in the gut for treating diarrhea. And that is actually an approved drug called Estefan in Cuba. So if you're going to be a digestive detoxifier, it's going to be a high dose that just stays in the gut. My product is absorbed into the bloodstream, so you don't need more than the 10 milligrams per drop or 10 milligrams per dose, because it's all going to be absorbed. And about 1.5 bottles, about 1 gram of the product has over 90 square feet of surface area, which holds a huge amount of heavy metal. So you need a much lower dose to get a much better benefit of the product. It's like when you purify something. You know, the ancient Egyptians used to boil willow bark and put it on their head or put it in teas for a headache. Well, that's aspirin. But they needed like a lot of willow bark to do the same thing that a small aspirin would do, because it's purified and isolated and you have just exactly what you need. And so you need much less of my stuff to get a much better benefit. Okay. All right, guys, I'm going to apologize. It is getting really late. It's almost 10:30. So I'm going to say thank you very much. I'm going to keep doing these. I'm supplying a lot of data to Navan to make it available to all the distributors. A lot of what I just talked about is in my white paper that's in your back office under resources. So please take a look at the white paper. If anyone has any questions, of course, get it back to customer service and they'll ask me. But I'm happy to do this again in the near future. So guys, I want to thank you very much and have a great night. Thank you.